Hello readers, and welcome to another edition of Pages for All Ages. I'm Leah Godwin from Fitzgerald Elementary.
And I'm Nita Campos from Pope Elementary. We have an extra special show today.
I am pleased to introduce Parna Bissell. Parna is here to clear up some misconceptions surrounding graphic novels.
Many teachers and parents feel graphic novels are not real books, but there is quite a bit of sophistication when it comes to graphic novels. So Parna, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my name is Parna Bissell. I'm a representative for Capstone. That's a K-12 publishing company, and I've worked for them for 20 years.
Okay, well let's get into it and talk about graphic novels. How did Superman come to be?
Back in 1932, two young men, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, were from Cleveland, Ohio, and they started writing a new comic book. And they created a new plot storyline and a new character, and they worked on this from 1932 to 1938. That was 6 years. And in 1938, they sold the rights to their story and their character to DC Comics, and they produced the first Superman comic books. But it wasn't called Superman, it was called Action Comics #1.
And you have some really fascinating stats on comic books in the 1930s.
Comic books became very popular very quickly. Within a few short years, there were 80 to 100 million comic books sold each week. And when you take into consideration that this is during the Depression and people couldn't really afford to buy comic books, so they would kind of pool their resources in order to afford to buy it. And so one person would buy a comic book, but it would change hands like 6 times. So that gives you an idea of the readership. And by the 1940s, there were 90% of young adults were reading comic books.
And how did books get such a bad rap? You know, after a while they kind of did.
Comic books were very popular, but there were also a lot of people that were worried about comic books, and for the most part it was parents. Parents were worried that comic books were not good moral quality, they weren't going to support what they were learning in school. They just worried that comic books were not really good literature. But there was one gentleman who really disliked comic books, and he was a psychiatrist, and his name was Frederick Wortham. And he believed that there was a direct link between reading comic books and becoming a juvenile delinquent. And so he decided that he really needed to do some research on this subject. Now keep in mind that during this period of time, 90% of young adults are reading comic books.
90%.
But only 1% are in juvenile delinquent facilities. But Frederick Wortham believed that if you read a comic book, you stood a greater chance of becoming a juvenile delinquent. And he decided that what he wanted to do is he wanted to go into juvenile delinquent facilities and interview the inmates and ask them what they were reading. Well, because of the age range, a very large proportion of them were reading comic books. And he believed that that's proved his hypothesis. And so he wrote a book. And he called it Seduction of the Innocent. And he produced this title, and he believed that this proved his hypothesis. Well, this book became a minor bestseller, and it was widely read by parents. And parents became very concerned about comic books, and parents became concerned about comic books. And when enough parents become concerned about something, your elected officials become concerned about it. So Congress started holding hearings on the validity and safety of comic books. Well, now the comic book industry did not want to be dictated to by Congress, and so they decided that the best thing to do would be to self-censor themselves. And so they created a code of conduct. And this code of conduct stayed in effect until, I'm pretty sure it was 2011 when it finally quietly went away. So they felt that everybody would be happy. The comic book industry would be happy because they would self-censor. Parents would be happy. Congress would be happy. And they all thought the problem was solved. But there was a group that really were not happy, and that was the writers and illustrators of comic books. The writers and illustrators felt that there needed to be a new term to describe comic books because they thought comic books had now a negative connotation that it wouldn't be easy to overcome. And so they were looking for something different to call comic books. And the book Seduction of the Innocent was done in 1954. So from 1954 to 1978, they were really looking for something else to call comic books. And in 1978, a young man named Will Eisner, he wrote a new book, and it was a comic book, but he called it A Contract with God. And on the front cover, on the right by the binding on the side, he wrote a graphic novel by Will Eisner. And that is where a lot of scholars believe that the role or the term graphic novel came from.
What is the difference between a graphic novel and a comic book?
A graphic novel is really takes a sophisticated reader, because there's a lot that goes into a graphic novel that you don't think about. So a graphic novel is made of panels. A panel is the little squares that are the artwork. And there are 11 different types of panels in a graphic novel. Now you can use all of the panels, you can use some of the panels, you'll use more panels than others. It just depends on what information the writer and the illustrator wants to convey. So in addition to panels, they also have gutters. And a gutter is the white space that appears between the panels. And there's 6 different types of gutters. But a lot of the action of a graphic novel actually happens in the gutters, because as you move from one panel to the next, you use your imagination. For example, let's say there's a panel where a person is jumping out of the plane. And in the second panel, you see him landing. So all of the time that he is falling through the air, that's happening in the gutter and in your imagination. So in a graphic novel, you could have 2 people reading the same book, but because part of it happens in your imagination, the storyline is the same, but how you're perceiving the story can change.
And students have to infer what took place in that gutter.
Correct.
And so we also call them speech bubbles, but I know they're called something different in graphic novels.
Right, and I always thought of them as speech bubbles too, but they're actually called balloons. And there's 6 different types of balloons, and once again, the balloons are used based upon what the writer wants to convey and the illustrator wants to show. And so there are nonverbal balloons, such as, like kapow and wow, and then there's balloons where dialogue takes place.
And I just noticed like a lot of graphic novels nowadays, they're not just superheroes. We're talking about really sophisticated, mature content also. It's not just superheroes and just, they're high school, they're more for kids, they're for everybody. And I think that pictures give a lot of support to those kids that need support in their reading.
I mean, graphic novels nowadays, you have fiction, but you also have nonfiction, so you have curriculum supporting graphic novels. And graphic novels are really great for struggling readers because they give you a visual clue as to what the content is about. And because you have to use your imagination quite a bit in graphic novels, they are really for a sophisticated reader. And history has showed that comic books had a certain attitude. And sometimes I wonder what will history show how we perceive graphic novels today? Or are we going to limit what they can do and how we use them? Or will they be used to the advantage of students who are really struggling to read and understand information?
Well, I'm hoping that we can change the perception of graphic novels, because I think there is still some sort of negative perception, because I know I have parents that are like, my kid's reading too many graphic novels, it's all they want to check out, or teachers will say, no more graphic novels, I want you getting a real book or a novel. And I got to hear Dave Pilkey speak several years ago at TLA, and hearing him speak, it's about the relationship a student has with the book and what happens between them and those words. It's not about a real book or what we consider literature, because graphic novels are real books. It's just written differently, but it's that connection the students have with a book. And can that lead to something else later? Absolutely, but it breaks my heart when someone says, put that book back, you already have 2 graphic novels, or let those kids read what they want to read, to have that connection. And if they love it, then that means they're loving books. And isn't that what this is all about anyways?
And I hear people mistakenly say, don't get a comic book, you need something with more meat to it. And so I think sometimes that really makes those striving readers feel
Less than.
let down or
Yeah.
less than, because...
Or they're not a good reader, and they are. They just...
Yeah, my own daughter, she's a 4th grade teacher, but she is dyslexic. And so her world of reading was opened by the Archie Digests, in the checkout line at the grocery store. And so, they really do have a place for students who are struggling to read.
And they are hugely popular right now.
Right.
Like, I can't keep the graphic novels on the shelves at Pope Elementary, and I want to order more I can only allow 1 checkout right now because I don't have enough for the whole school. But if they want to check out 2, I would love for them to be able to check out 2. And
I really love the Max Axiom. I really like that series because it's nonfiction and it seems very exciting, and he seems superhero-ish to me.
And they have a lot of biographies now in graphic novel format. The kids are like loving, like there's a Harriet Tubman they want to come and read, and I hope we can dispel some of those misconceptions or people telling them put that back, or he's reading too many graphic novels, or she's reading, and they really are great.
I'm learning how to love a graphic novel too, and I've read Amulet so far. I've read the first two, The Stonekeeper and The Stonekeeper's Curse.
Well, thank you so much for coming here
Thank
today,
you. I've
Parna,
enjoyed it. I
and
appreciate
helping
it.
us.
Thank you
and,
so much.
We're going to let Parna go, and then we're going to get into some more books. All right, since we just finished talking with Parna, I'm going to go right into a graphic novel. I have this one. It's called New Kid by Jory. It is a middle grade graphic novel appropriate for students in grades 5 through 7. In this book, Jordan's our main character. Jordan desperately wants to go to art school, but his parents send him to the prestigious Riverdale, which is a private school. Jordan, who is African American, faces stereotyping and racism since he is one of only a handful of minorities. Jordan's parents don't quite fully understand what Jordan is going through, but his grandfather is quite helpful. Jordan is a talented artist and details his struggles in his sketchbook. This graphic novel touches on assumptions, listening to each other, learning about each other's cultures. The color illustrations in this graphic novel are fantastic. I just marked a few for you to see. I just love this. And then when he is sketching his troubles in the book, his sketches are in black and white. Great book to add to any collection to discuss diversity and problems. A great book to start a discussion. Fantastic. Love it.
And I have The Good Egg by Jory John, illustrated by Pete Oswald. These guys were the creators of the book that came out in the 2x2 list called The Bad Seed. And, you know, the Bad Seed thought he was really, really bad, and The Good Egg is just so good. He'll paint your fence, he'll bring you water, but he realizes that being the good egg is not all it's cracked up to be. And he learns how to make all the other eggs in the carton get along. Fun book. Jory John and Pete Oswald are a great team. If you loved The Bad Seed, you will love The Good Egg.
I just love his little glasses with his big green eyes. It is precious. My next book is Let's Go Swimming on Doomsday by Natalie C. Anderson. It is a YA, which is a young adult book. It is a realistic fiction, and the setting is in war-torn Somalia. The story begins with our main character, Abdi, in the custody of a UN social worker, Sam, who is unable to find him a foster home. Abdi ends up staying with Sam in the evenings, and Sam takes him to a girl-only refugee boarding school during the day. The story is told in alternating present tense and past tense, as in flashbacks. You learn that when Abdi was 12 years old, his older brother Dahir is kidnapped by Al-Shabaab, which is an Islamist militant group. 3 years later, he and his family are rounded up by the African Union Mission in Somalia, which is a U.S.-backed agency. He is forced to infiltrate Al-Shabaab to help his family, and he learns that his brother has risen in the ranks and is now a commander for Al-Shabaab. He decides to go on a rescue mission, but it doesn't go as planned, which takes him to where the book begins. It is a complex story that I know I'm simplifying. It is a story of family, it is a story of guilt, love, tragedy, violence. It is fantastic. I couldn't put the book down. Really good for this day and age. Wonderful book. Highly, highly recommend it.
My next book is a picture book, Wordy Birdy Meets Mr. Cougarpants by Tammi Sauer, illustrated by Dave Mottram. Another great team. They had Wordy Birdy that came out last year, and now Wordy Birdy Meets Mr. Cougarpants. Wordy Birdy loves everything. She loves the sunrise. She loves color. She loves everything, and she talks about everything she loves all the time. She and her pals are going on a camping trip, but of course, Wordy Birdy can't be quiet or monitor her surroundings. She's never aware of what's going on around her. Her pals, Raccoon, Rabbit, and Squirrel, notice a cougar in the forest, but Wordy Birdy is unfazed, as she calls the cougar Mr. Cougarpants and continually talks about everything, including how rabbits taste bad and she's simply too adorable to eat. Mr. Cougarpants or Mr. Cougar, is appalled that she would call him Mr. Cougarpants, and he decides to run away, claiming that all he wanted was a nice, quiet dinner. The illustrations are colorful and funny. The expressions on the characters' faces as they explain about Wordy Birdy being a little chatty are hilarious. And Wordy Birdy's faraway, empty look is laughable and endearing. I love these books for read-alouds, and the kids roar with laughter.
I love Wordy Birdy.
I love Wordy Birdy. I think I'm kin to her.
This next one is It's Not Hansel and Gretel by Josh Funk. We love Josh Funk.
Hilarious.
So this is a fractured fairy tale that is a whole lot of fun. First, let me just say that the illustrations are a feast for your eyes. The colors are extraordinary, and pay very close attention to the illustrations because you will find some fun little details like the caterpillar from Alice in Wonderland, the 7 dwarves, the flying monkey, Puss in Boots, and many, many others. So in this book, the narrator is telling the story of Hansel and Gretel, and before long, Hansel and Gretel are changing the story and arguing with the narrator. The narrator gets annoyed with the duo, but that's where the fun begins. Soon the kids have mustaches, a unicorn, and open up their very own bakery. This is the second book in a series, the first being It's Not Jack and the Beanstalk. The third book will be It's Not Little Red Riding Hood. It's coming out in February of next year, which I hate because I really don't want to wait that long. But this is a hilarious read aloud, and like I said, the illustrations are just so much fun. Let me just show you, because look at that color. They just look delicious, and I just love these so much. You got to have this. So funny.
I have a middle grade, but also called a YA novel. I do look up the reviews, and it's different on different reviews. Sort of a sophisticated book. This is The Book of Boy by Catherine Gilbert Murdock. It was a 2019 Newbery Honor book. It is set in 1350, and Boy, that is his name, Boy, lives at a manor and takes care of the goats. He lives with the goats, he sleeps with the goats, and yes, he smells like a goat. And when a pilgrim named Secundus passes by the manor, he asks if Boy can accompany him on a pilgrimage. He's trying to find all of the relics of St. Peter so he can redeem his soul and leave hell for the promise of paradise. He must find a rib, a tooth, a thumb, a toe, dust, skull, and the tomb of St. Peter. Boy is a hunchback, and he's very glad to carry Secundus's pack on his back because it makes his hump a little less noticeable. After a time, Boy's hump begins to itch, and as he bathes at one of the ends, he finds feathers in his bathwater, and he discovers that, yes, he is an angel. It is such a short book, but such a great read. The reader will root for Secundus to make it to heaven, and will also be on the boy's side as he discovers his wings. Beautifully written, beautiful cover, I think.
Beautiful cover. Oh my gosh.
It's worth your time.
That is gorgeous. That is beautiful. I need that book. All right, my last book is Alma and How She Got Her Name by Juana Martinez-Neal. It is a Caldecott honor book, and it is also on the 2x2 list. If you were to ask our main character, Alma Sofia Esperanza Jose Pura Candela, about her name, she will tell you it's too long and it doesn't fit on anything. Her daddy decides to tell her the story of her name, and she can then decide for herself if her name fits. Alma learns that Sophia was her grandmother who loved books, poetry, flowers, and taught Alma's father how to read. Alma learns that Pura was her great aunt who believed the spirits of their ancestors were always watching over them. And Candela was her other grandmother who always stood up for what was right. Alma learns that her name fits her just right. It is a quiet, lovely, sweet story. I love Alma with her pink cheeks and her pink bow and her pink heart and her pink striped pants. And I gotta tell you, before I even knew it was a Caldecott honor book, I was thinking to myself that this book needs to be nominated. And I just gotta show you the inside of this book. It is breathtaking. The beautiful illustrations, they're soft, muted colors. When I was reading this for the first time, I was like, gosh, this book is just gorgeous to look at.
Well, I fell in love with the cover when I saw it, too, on the list.
She's so cute.
I was so happy that it was on.
Yes.
the 2x2 list also,
Yes.
because that book needs to be shared with a lot of little kids that, or even adults.
Even adults.
That have some kind of angst about their name. The Ethan I Was Before by Allie Standish is a middle grade novel. And it's such an appropriate title for the book, The Ethan I Was Before. Ethan's life has surely changed after his best friend, Casey, takes a dare from him and falls from a tree, causing her to have brain damage. Throughout the book, you find Ethan struggling with the guilt of the accident, fighting to be liked again by his family and his brother. But he doesn't really understand they don't dislike him. They just don't know how to make his situation better. The family moves to live with the estranged grandfather after the loss of his wife, and they use this as an excuse to give Ethan a change of scenery because, of course, they have to take care of grandfather. Ethan meets a young girl named Coralie, who's a girl who makes things better for Ethan by being patient and accepting of him. But she also faces her own battles because she likes to embellish the truth. She likes to say and do things that are kind of out there, but she is a true friend. This is a great book, and definitely is a mascara alert.
I think I'm going to have to read this one.
You'll have
I'm
to
gonna
read
have
it.
to.
It's a
And
wonderful story.
we don't have any more books, but just really quickly, I just finished Jennifer Nielsen's book, Resistance.
And it's the next on my pile.
She is one of my favorite authors of all time. Loved it, and I am in the middle of reading this one, 5 Feet Apart, and the movie is coming out, I believe, next week. I can't put this down. Like, it's so good. But I'll be reviewing these 2 books next month. And thank you for joining us today on another edition of Pages for All Ages, and we will see you guys next time.
Happy reading.
Happy reading.